Hey all, Pie here, and full disclosure up top, I've already played this part once. And the reason why you're not watching that footage instead of this re-recorded footage is because I completed the segment. I got to the end of the session. I saved the file, everything was fine and dandy. I loaded it up to edit it, and there was no audio. No game audio at all. Pure silence. And I've already done the reconstructing audio once, and I am not doing it again. I'm sorry. I do not have that level of patience and energy and time. I cannot do it. So, we're re-recording this. I am so sorry that these are not going to be my first initial reactions this time. There were several things that happened that I wish I could give you my first reaction to. Anyway, I'm gonna stop whining. We're gonna call Lee. You picked up the receiver and quickly punched in the familiar number while going to take a seat on the couch. Soon enough, after explaining the situation to the housekeeper, Lee answered.
Hey!
Hi, Lee. Can you talk? Definitely. We practically have to. My gosh, can you believe it's almost time for school to start? What happened to our summer? School starts first thing tomorrow for me.
Boo!
Ew. And I thought starting next week was bad enough. Enjoy your last week? Oh, I will. I hope you'll survive your first day. I think it'll be okay. School isn't too bad. That's true. Maybe it'll end up being a really good year. At least summer was nice while it lasted, right? We were busy. Yeah. Fondly, you thought about all the best memories you made this summer. Lee was there for some, but there were still many that you hadn't filled her in on yet. You reminisced about a moment of your summer. You began to speak about the road trip you took. I went on a vacation. Cove's parents ended up inviting my whole family on an RV road trip.
Really?
Whoa, that's awesome. It was a 3-day trip, and we visited the Redwood National Forest. Lucky. Cove was flirting with me on the trip.
What?
Cove did what? He tried to flirt. I was surprised too. Ah! I'm so happy for you! You have to keep me updated on what happens next. It was hard to focus on what she was saying. Your face was probably red right now, just thinking about what had happened. That one day with the big shopping trip in the morning. There was this day that Mom and Ma took me and Elizabeth on a big supply shopping trip. What made that so memorable? Lee chuckled, but you could hear the curiosity in her voice. I stayed out late, hanging out with Cove. Ooh, what were you two up to? It wasn't hard to imagine the teasing look Lee must have had on her face. Her imagination was already running far too wild. Nothing crazy happened. Boo. We just got caught up with stuff. The day was over before we knew it. Those are always good days. Yeah. That time you went to Cove's house for dinner. One night, Cove's parents invited me over for dinner at their house for the first time. Mr. Holden made Mexican food. I got to name one of Cove's pet fish. What did you pick? Speedy. Wow, why hasn't Cove asked me to name one of his fish? He has a bunch, right? That had you bursting into laughter. You almost accidentally dropped the phone. She giggled in return. That incredibly hot afternoon. I remember the hottest day this summer. I could barely do anything and had to stay inside the entire afternoon. Cove was hot at his house, so he bummed around mine all day. I'm not surprised to hear that. The two of you shared some amusement over it. He moved on to talk about her. What was your big highlight of the summer, Lee? Talking to you is always the best part of my summer. Even though it was a phone call, you just knew Lee was winking at you. Good, I'm glad you picked the right answer. That had Lee laughing hard for a few moments. Alright, okay. So, a high point for me was when I took a trip with my parents to Europe. That was amazing. I wish I could go to Europe. It's on my bucket list. One day we'll see the world. One day! Anyway, you and Lee continue to go over your adventures until you both were yawning to each other over the phone. Before you go, there's one other thing. I kissed Cove today. There was a pause of silence. Knowing your cousin, you decided to pull your ear away from the phone. As expected, a screech loud enough for you to still make out clearly from a distance crackled through the speaker. When you felt it was safe, you put the phone back against your head. Lee was still gushing to herself, though a little less loudly. Why didn't you say so sooner? He had to have kissed you back, right? You two are the most perfect pair ever. Tell me, please. You used the precious little time you had left to try filling her in as best you were capable of in that moment. But soon the approach of curfew became too much for you to ignore, despite how excited the both of you were. At that, you decided it was time to say goodbye for now. You did have school to wake up for in the morning. Bye, Lee.
Bye.
Night, Joy. Talk to you later. You left the phone on the side table for now. Looking at the clock on the wall, you saw there was only about 10 minutes until your moms would be insisting you had to go to bed so you could be rested enough for school. You stretched your legs out on the couch and sighed in defeat, watching the minute hand change 1 minute closer to bedtime. You rearranged yourself, feeling restless, and looked out the window. Startled initially, you spotted a figure out in the hills. It was Cove. When the surprise faded, you realized it really wasn't that much of a shock at all. It was exactly something Cove would do. You went outside to meet up with him. Strolling casually, you went over to the front door. When you arrived, you noticed how many fireflies were out that night. They drifted along lazily, barely minding your presence as you waded through to reach the top of the hill. Cove turned towards you as you approached, and you noticed right away that Cove looked happy to see you. Hey. You had a bounce in your step. You weren't sure how long you'd get before your moms roped you back inside for bed. Hey, you're starting strong. Out late on the very first school night of the year? Chuckling, Cove crossed his arms. Seriously, what are you doing here?
Nothing.
Nothing. Not really. He shrugged, seeming unhappy with his own answer. You stared at him, waiting for him to continue. Well, I guess I was feeling kind of weird about stuff, so I'm getting some fresh air before bed. I know how you feel. It's hard to say still. Tomorrow's gonna be the start of a new year. At the mention of school, a small noise escaped him. Cove let himself fall back onto his butt and then all the way down, so he was laying on his back. He looked up at the sky. We're not yet ready for this advanced move. You laid down yourself. You lowered yourself to lay back on the hill. He had been lost in thought, or was possibly waiting for you to situate yourself, but he started speaking unprompted again. Thanks for telling me about my dad, and the money he offered you to be my friend. This was probably the last thing you were expecting out of him. Cove seemed to pick up on that and stretched his arms out wide in front of him.
I mean...
This is where we met, remember? It happened that day. You could recall the sad little boy with a pink cast who you found on this very spot. It felt like a lifetime ago. I kind of have a strange feeling looking at you. Not in a bad way, just thinking about you then and really seeing you now. It's something. He turned his face away from you. You got the impression he was trying to hide a blush. It was almost unbelievable how much of an impact he made on your life just by moving in next door. You couldn't even imagine what your days might have looked like in a world where you hadn't met him. Cove glanced back at you, waiting for a response, and you had no idea what to say. Then, still without a word from you, Cove shook his head strongly. What? It's you. Huh? He snickered before answering. He looked thoroughly amused with your reaction. That's what you do all the time, so I'm being you. So do you, Cove. Really? Yes, always. Cove couldn't help but grin at that. Honestly, there weren't many people you could think of who could tease you about something like that. Returning his smile, you realized there was no denying that you two have been around each other for a long time. Cove broke the quiet before it could fully settle.
See you tomorrow.
Hey, I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, see you then. With a final wave, Cove headed for home, but you stayed there a few minutes longer. Your mind kept going back to his simple statement, see you tomorrow. No matter how much was changing around you, there were some things in your life that always seemed to remain true. The hills felt warm to you that night. Before you knew it, you were getting comfortable under the covers in your room. Your mind couldn't help but still be buzzing with thoughts about the future. It was hard not to think about Cove. There hadn't been enough time to really figure it all out after what happened between you. You felt excited. There was little doubt in your mind that things were moving forward, and you couldn't wait to find out what changes were waiting for you on the horizon. Slowly, your eyes grew heavy as you drifted off to sleep, your mind spinning with wishful thoughts. No matter what happened next, you could only hope that you would make the most of it. You were ensnared in a dream when a noise from the outside world jostled you. Your eyes snapped open. The light clatter continued. Now you were more alert, you could distinguish it as a tapping sound. Quiet, slow, but persistent. Each beat was like being poked. You couldn't ignore it. You lifted your head from the pillow and looked for the source. Not much work was needed to puzzle it out. It was from the window. With that, you knew exactly what it was. From the color of the light filtering into your room, it was too early for anyone to be awake, including the sun. It had barely hauled itself over the horizon, but that didn't stop some people, it seemed. You sat up in bed and opened the window wide. Cool air, not yet warmed by the day, tickled your face as it pushed into your room. And, just as you'd expected, there was your neighbor crouching on your windowsill. He was fully dressed, though, not for school. He was wearing a wetsuit and a shy smile.
Joy.
Hi, Joy. You stared back, blinking. So, technically, we won't be back to school for a few more hours. Uh-huh. His voice was delicate yet deliberate, each word a careful explanation. Classes haven't actually started yet. So, do you want to hit the beach with me one more time this summer? This child. You're crazy. Only Cove would think of something like this, but that was part of what made him special to you. You rushed to get changed into something suitable while Cove climbed back down to the ground level. Your limbs, still half asleep, struggled somewhat as you attempted to coordinate them into a swimsuit, but you got there in the end. Soon you were tiptoeing out of your front door, clutching a towel. Cove was already there to greet you. Your eyes met. Cove's gaze darted to your destination and back to you. You checked the door was closed, gave him a thumbs up, and the two of you leapt into action. Wordlessly, you began to run down the familiar path ahead, Cove beside you. The thrill of your illicit outing made you want to laugh. Not that you dared. If anyone in your family looked out and saw you, then your summer would be back to being over. One glance at Cove told you that he was exactly the same, holding back snickers for fear of being heard and caught. The towel streamed out from under your arm like a cape. You were running so fast downhill that simply keeping your balance and not tumbling down was a real threat. It just wasn't enough of one to make you slow your pace. For every step you took, the beach was a little closer and the day a little brighter. What lay ahead for you would arrive, and you were happy to meet it. And then they got back home and were beaten black and blue. In between. Alright. So now I get to make some changes, if I so desire, and I think I do. So, editing magic will happen, and then I will get back to you guys. Alright. So, this is a mature Joy. They've changed their hairstyle a little bit and gotten some piercings. But other than that, nothing much has really changed. And we're going for love, because of course. Ready? Yes. Both. Alright, more editing magic. Alright, this is Adult Cove in all of his various outfits. Feast your eyes. Done. I want him to be kind of mixed between studious and sporty, and quiet is fine. Done. Since you're romantically interested in Cove and are old enough to start being physically affectionate more seriously, you can choose what initiative level he has through step 3. Making sure the player experiences what they want is important in our life, but always putting your choice first can potentially make a relationship feel one-sided. So, we've added some flexibility in how it works out. Low initiative means that Cove will occasionally ask to touch the MC, and in those situations there will always be an opportunity to say yes or no. For example, he won't simply lean over and kiss the MC as a greeting or an emotional moment. Every piece of physical interaction will be either initiated or approved by the player before it happens. Middle initiative means there will be those certain times when Cove requests to touch the MC, many chances to initiate affection on your own, and also Cove will pretty regularly give affection automatically. One example would be giving the MC a kiss because he's happy or emotional or something else. And in other situations, you can choose not to make the first move in order to give Cove the space to be the one to act afterwards. Overall, Cove can get romantic, but the player's agency will take priority. High initiative includes everything middle does, but it also means that the player agency will be reduced to a degree in favor of having Cove give physical affection even more frequently and with less prompting. Instead of all the major affection-giving situations being led by a choice menu for you to decide on, some will instead be replaced by Cove acting automatically. This level is only recommended if you're very comfortable with physical affection and would prefer to simply see it happen rather than always holding the reins on it. However, this level is mostly relevant if Cove ends up as your official boyfriend at some point. Situations where a high-level initiative makes a difference tend to come in scenes that are exclusive to being in a relationship. The parts that are also included in the middle initiative will be seen whether you're dating or not. Once you pick your level, it can't be changed later, so keep your full playthrough in mind when deciding. We hope you enjoy whichever initiative option you decide on. Alright, so the first time I went through this, I was a little giddy. Little giddy. And I went for high initiative. And now that I've kind of had chance to reflect on that, I feel like middle is probably better. Because I do want to give... I want this to feel like a give and take sort of situation rather than Cove always initiating or me always initiating, you know? So, I think I'm actually just gonna go for middle initiative this time. And as of right now, that is literally the only difference between the first time I played this and this time. Oh, but I do want to say I really... I didn't mention this yet. I really appreciate that the devs behind this game put enough thought into this that they're just like, let's give the player the option to say how affectionate they want Cove to be towards them. Because, you know, not everybody's actually into all that physical stuff. And, like, most of the time people who are a little bit repulsed by that get completely ignored in these kinds of games. So, like, good job, team. I appreciate you. I appreciate your work. We're moving on. The start of classes ended the relaxing, free days of summer. It didn't take long for you to get back into the swing of the school year routine. Schedules and homework became the new normal. Derek wasn't around nearly as much. With school and after-school activities, there weren't many opportunities for him to take the trip out to your neighborhood. Sometimes you'd hear that he was at a training camp or something like that, but you weren't always sure what he was up to. But you still kept in touch over the phone as best you could. The Jeremy kid did disappear after the summer, and no one ever heard from him again. Where he went or what he might be up to was a mystery. More summers came and went like the waves on the shore coming in and out. In your second year of high school, someone new started to visit Sunset Bird, a sunny girl named Terry Brooke. She was a friend Cove made due to them both being ocean-obsessed. Terry was more than glad to befriend you too. Someone close to Cove had to be good company, she felt. You were pleased to get along with her as well. Terry was tight with another girl who you had known distantly from school for a long time, Miranda Eckert. You saw more and more of her as time went on, thanks to Terry and Miranda's own outreach. After a while, all of you developed a real friendship together. Girlfriends. As for your home life, the Joneses also had developments. Changing laws and public perception countrywide made it possible for your moms to openly wear their wedding rings without questions. Though they had a wedding years ago, it was only recently that the union was officially recognized everywhere in the U.S. That was a good day, to say the least. Elizabeth came into her own and stopped being quite as irritable. She'd no longer worried about perceived childishness as she grew up for real. She didn't even mind being called Lizzie again, although most people used Liz. She eventually graduated high school and moved out to attend college in another state. It was a lot for you to adjust to your older sister being gone. Liz never let you forget her role in your life, though, and kept in touch. Cove's relationships with his family improved over the years. Kyra visited several times after that summer, and things became easier between the two of you. Between the two. I'm adding words now. He was also closer with his dad than ever before. You knew they talked more, and that helped to prevent a lot of friction before it could start. However, Cove grew into someone no one would call social. He kept to himself, usually. He cared for the few connections he did have, but didn't reach outside of them. Cove's interest had shifted from when he was younger. He still enjoyed more studious pursuits, but he also spent just as much time on athletic activities. Things had shifted between you and Cove, but in a way that most couldn't see. After all this time, he wasn't just your neighbor, he wasn't only your friend, or even a guy you were interested in. You were in love with him. You loved Cove. You knew that fact for certain. There was no one else you held those feelings for. It was strange to look back on it all. The future faded into your present, and then it was simply the past. Even the most fundamental parts of your life couldn't last forever. You felt the most pointedly the day you inevitably graduated high school. It was over, and you would not be going back ever again. From now on, what came next was your choice. You would be directing your own life. That was where you were currently, the summer after school had ended, the first summer of true freedom. And the last. What used to be a reprieve from the typical was now going to be your first step into adulthood. One fine summer morning, you took in what had become a very special scene, the whole family having a meal together. Your big sister Liz still hadn't lived at home full-time for a couple years, but she arrived last week to spend the season here, and since it was an off semester for her. She wanted to make sure she was in town because you had now also graduated high school, so who knew how much rarer these moments would become in the future. You watched on as Liz laughed good-naturedly over a comment Mom made. Her Elizabeth-only mindset had only been a phase. Nearly any nickname was welcomed at this point in her life. Strangely, even though she moved away, you'd lately felt closer to her than you had in a long time. You idly scooped up more of your breakfast and chewed absent-mindedly. You generally ate whatever. And the meal you had reflected that. It included just about everything your moms had made, though you often made your own food nowadays. With Liz around, though, your parents made even more options than usual. Your sister had been vegetarian for a while, and they wanted to make sure she had choices too. It doesn't hit as hard the second time round, but it still hits. Oh, it still hits. I'm fine. I'm fine. Everything is fine. I'm just a little emotional because they're getting older. Anyway, get yourself together. Conversation had gone on idly without you fully taking in the words until your ears were piqued when Ma started on a bit of a town gossip.
Uh-huh.
And so that's how I heard the news. Alright, now stop burying the lead and tell us, what is this so-called news? Ma giggled as she cast a look across the table, satisfied that she had everyone's attention. Well, it turns out the Donnells won't be renting out the condo up the street as per Sunset Bird tradition for the first time in what must be nearly 2 decades. A chorus of gasps and shocked expressions were had all around. After the initial shock, your eyebrows pinched. Mom may consider them by name, but you and Liz always viewed them exclusively as the mean old couple who would yell at anyone under 25 who crossed their paths. Heh. Your mom continued on with the story, spreading strawberry jam over a piece of toast as she did so. They've decided not to take big trips anymore. Friends and family will be visiting them at their home. That's nice for them, then. Have a good summer, mean grandparents with no grandkids. Away from us. My thoughts exactly, Liz. Be nice, kids. You don't want to end up like them, do you? You and your sister cracked smiles at the joke.
Well?
At least they won't be here to yell at my children anymore.
Why?
And that blunt comment got laughter from all 3 of you. Engrossed in conversation once more, you continued to chat with your family until the meal was over. Step 3. Third time's charm. As it went, once the food was eaten, the cleanup had to be done. Liz took the role of washing the dishes and passed them to you for drying and putting away. You had a set of cups in front of you that needed to go on the top shelf of the cabinet. It was effortless to do. You were very tall. That was simply your lot in life. You'd always been vertically gifted. Yeah. You didn't think about it much. That part of yourself was never something you could really figure out your thoughts on. Liz shook you out of your internal musing by starting up an impromptu conversation. She seemed to be voicing the thoughts that had been buzzing around in her own head. I have to say, going back and forth another semester this fall is pretty intimidating. You'd think after the first year or 2 I'd have a handle on things, but no. You stole a glance at her, still placing cups in the proper place. I guess it's only fair. My first round was pretty general classes, and year 1 of my architecture major was the basics. Now it feels serious. I have to actually know some things. The horrors being expected to learn in college. The laugh she gave was flippantly airy, but the way she scrubbed at the plates held more force than necessary. I know you can handle it. How sweet of you to believe in me, thanks. Your older sister's mouth quirked into a small smile. It'll be fine, one way or another. Oh, but I'm not trying to scare you away from college, if that's even your plan. What's going on with that anyway? So, to be 100% realistic, if you've graduated from high school and you don't know what your plan is, it's too fucking late. You damn missed the boat. It's gone. There's nowhere you're gonna be able to get in. Maybe community college, but... Unrealistic! You have to have this shit planned from the time you're 5 years old! I'm venting. What was the question? You had kind of a general idea. You answered the question as much as you were able and willing to. This smile grew more reassuring as you did. You made it through 12 years of full-time education already. You've got plenty going for you. Sometimes it still felt hard to believe your public schooling experience was over. In the end, you had been an average graduate. And you were satisfied leaving off there. It had been a familiar and enjoyable part of your life, but you were ready to move on. Liz picked up on the silence her question ended up creating. She decided it was time to make a closing statement on the topic.
You're a good kid.
You're a good kid, Joy. Do what's best for you, and we'll be here to back it up. Thanks. You're a good big sister. At that, Liz happily passed the final dish your way. She waved a soapy hand as a farewell and moved on to her next task for the cleanup job. You refocused on getting the last pieces put back where they belonged. You eventually moved on to a new chore, but that was interrupted by the sound of your cell phone. The phone was just set to vibrate, which, IRL is usually what my phone's set to, but as those of you who watch the KOTOR 2 series know, I have a very special ringtone whenever I turn it on. I've been sharing that with my coworkers at work recently. They're all horrified. Anyway. You casually picked it up from the table where you had placed it earlier. The phone was a couple years old at this point, having been a 16th birthday gift from your parents. They decided which model to get, but you got to pick the color. It was red. And it was just a phone. You didn't do anything to decorate it. The screen lit up as you gave the little device a swipe with one finger. You were informed by caller ID it was Lee. You weren't surprised. Despite having busier and busier lives and not living in the same town, you still had a good relationship with your cousin of the same age. Especially once the miracle of the both of you having your own phones actually happened. She got hers first, though. Tapping at the accept button, you answered your call. A familiar bubbly voice came through right after.
Hi.
So something I didn't really notice the first time round until the very end is that the phone is actually red. And that makes me immensely happy. Anyway, also, Lee is gorgeous. She grew up pretty. Don't tell my wife. Sup. I trust I'm not interrupting anything major. Only some cleaning around the house. Oh, then you're welcome for my call. A distraction from that must have been desperately needed. Yes, thank you, my dear cousin.
My pleasure.
She giggled, and you could hear the jangling of the jewelry she must be wearing. Nothing amazing is happening for me either. I'm bored and felt like chatting. My morning shift ended, so I'm free for the rest of the day. Woo! That's good. You were off from your part-time job today. Like you, Lee had started dipping her toes into the workforce as of late. It made keeping in touch frequently even more complicated, but you both managed. What about you? It's been pretty normal.
Cool.
That's you then. So, how's Mr. Cole Holden doing? There was a teasing bent to her tone. She was never willing to let up on what was going on between the two of you. I have no idea if that caught on the recording, but that was quite the audio glitch. Heh. But that name was incredibly familiar to your ears. Cove, your next-door neighbor for the past decade at this point. But he was far more than just someone who lived on the same street. You vividly remember the summer day you expressed your feelings for each other as 13-year-olds. You started officially dating years ago. And you were in love with him, but that was one thing you hadn't admitted yet. Are you even surviving without the boy being 10 feet away at all times? Or is everything right with the world again and he's back? No, Lee, he isn't here. Just like he wasn't here yesterday, or the last time you asked, or the time before that.
Sorry.
Oh, my bad. Can you blame me? Doesn't it seem like he should have made his grand return already? Plus, I want to visit soon, and he needs to be there too. You could understand where she was coming from. This was certainly outside the norm. For the past couple of months, and the last few weeks especially, Cove had been going to his mom's place in Nevada. The two of you still regularly stayed in contact over text and calls, but still. Your mind began to drift back in time to all the prior trips he'd taken to visit her. Almost every year he'd have to go away for a while and then he'd be back. It made you feel sad and lonely when it happened. Your mom's helped you ship care packages to him and his mom. It was always full of really great stuff. He sent you regular letters in return. That's how it was in the past, but lately he'd been trying to see her as much as he could before taking long trips to another state became too impractical to do. His part-time work could become full-time soon, or he could be moving somewhere else for school. Cove hadn't actually been entirely clear what his plans were after graduation. Cove was hesitant to speak on that, even with you. It couldn't be avoided forever, though. You both knew that.
Well,
Maybe we should switch this up to a non-Cove related topic. That works. The rest of the conversation rolled on. Not much longer, though. Lee had to go, and you needed to finish your responsibilities around the house. The both of you exchanged goodbyes, then you went back to what you'd been working on before the call came in. As you wrapped up the last of your chores, you were approached by Liz wearing a cheeky smile. I've got Mom's keys. Want to get out of this tiny town to do some shopping in a real city? Yeah, it's been way too long since I've gone anywhere exciting.
good.
Good, I'm driving. Even though you could drive too, it was her plan. She could do it if she wanted. Go get your wallet and anything else. We're going now. With a nod, you made a quick detour to collect your stuff from your bedroom. You had money saved from all the part-time work you'd done, as well as from gifts you'd received. After making sure you both were fully prepared for the long haul to the largest city in the surrounding area, you buckled into the car. It was a smooth ride there, with light conversation about what shops to stop at and the radio blasting. Liz controlled what was played, but she made sure to pick songs she knew you liked. It was something the two of you had always done for each other. The trip there breezed by, and in what felt like no time, you had gone from cruising down the road to cruising through the mall. Liz had her interests to check out, and you yours. You had gotten into new things since you'd grown up. Alright, we have the list. You like to read? Fiction novels, comic books, manga, and you like to watch TV, movies, plays, people, and games were fun to you. You like to play board games, video games, card games, and you like to hang out with people. You like going to the beach and building sandcastles, swimming, looking for seashells, walking along the shore, going surfing, and you enjoy music. You listen to a lot of it. And you spent time on art, visiting galleries, and you wrote things. And that was everything major that came to mind. When turning a corner down a new length of the mall, your eyes caught on a little gift store. Your friends and family had recently given you many presents for graduating high school. You had a gift of your own ready to give to Cove when the chance came. It was something you had known you wanted to do, and you were looking forward to seeing his reaction. Graduation may have already come and gone, but Cove wasn't really around, so you had to wait. Eventually the mall was explored and full, with every shop of note being checked over. Rather than going home, you decided to walk over to some smaller stores nearby. Liz had many thoughts on that topic.
So?
Honestly, malls are not a bastion of society. Even if smaller stores require extra distance, the brands are so much more... Then your sister abruptly stopped speaking and walking, right in the middle of the path. It was a good thing no one was behind her. She seemed to entirely shut off for a moment. Liz? The attempt to catch her attention was unsuccessful. Something else had all her focus. Before you could puzzle out what might be happening, she began to mumble out of the corner of her mouth. Joy, don't draw attention, but look. What? With a harsh whisper and a shuttle jerk of her head, she urged you once more.
Hey.
Look! You followed her gaze as best you could to a large bunch of colorful teens strolling down the same path. Okay. You faced back over to your sister with a confused expression and an unspoken question. What were you supposed to be seeing there? Joy, doesn't one of them seem familiar? She was practically bouncing at this point, so you looked at the group over again, and this time you saw what she was seeing. Amongst the collection of strangers was brown hair, gray eyes, and lots of freckles. That's Shiloh! Our Shiloh! From when we were kids! Yep, that was definitely him. I can't believe it! He's honestly just there. That's hilarious. That's incredible. Oh, but how do we talk to him? We have to pull him away from all those other people and what if I'm wrong? Her mouth opened to reply, but she cut it off with her own answer to the question. I've got it. I'll shout the name Shiloh, and then we can act like it wasn't us. If he responds to that, we'll know without a doubt it's him. Joy, keep an eye out, see if he looks... This is a bad plan. This is a bad plan, Liz. Can't you just try talking to him normally? Likely without even hearing what you had to say, Liz put her plan into action. Shiloh! She loudly projected the word across the way and then put on an act of casualness, turning her head away from the scene while brushing at the skirt of her dress. In a supremely awkward moment, you could only stand there as attention in the area shifted to the two of you thanks to your sister's shout. But of the many startled bystanders who became alerted to your presence, one of them was the boy. From a distance, his large eyes met yours. He looked... A wide grin took over Liz's face. She pushed the rim of her sun hat up and away from her face while swishing back around to greet her old friend directly. Shiloh! Waving, she stepped a bit closer to express her intention to meet without really closing the gap. She wanted him to come to her. Who you presumed to be Shiloh looked surprised at the call-out. He stole a quick glance at the crowd he was with and hesitantly glanced back your way. He was trying to double-check something. Liz remained steadfast with her gaze trained on him, and ultimately he broke away from the rest of them. After a light-footed jog across the brick path, the young man pleasantly presented himself in front of Liz and you.
Hi.
Hi, I like your hat. Sweet baby. But did you become a serial killer? I need to know. Just that simple greeting had Liz giggling.
Hey.
Hello. I'm not sure if you remember this, but I'm Lizzie, and that's Joy. We were all friends when we were little kids. His already wide eyes grew even larger, their gaze darting between you and Liz. His previously chipper demeanor faded into something delicate. I'm really sorry, but I think you have the wrong person. You could tell not being instantly recognized was going to make this exchange more of a challenge. Still, Liz was undeterred. It was a long time ago. You were really young. I get why you feel like that. However, I'm positive I'm right. You're exactly the same. The face, the freckles, how genially you try to phrase things, you're even still wearing a hat. Instinctively, he looked up at his headwear with creased brows, not making the connection on why that meant something to her.
Okay.
We knew each other, okay? An uneasy smile settled on him as silence followed Liz's speech. He was picking his next words carefully. And then the quiet was obliterated by a new voice bursting into the conversation. Shiloh, what are you doing? The rest of the group already left. A field trip is not a vacation. We're on a schedule. Startled, your head snapped towards the path. A distinctly unhappy individual with piercing magenta eyes, dark brown skin, and a sharp jaw stormed your way. He carried a cloud of authority with him, despite looking like he wasn't even 18 yet. Sorry, I didn't mean to ditch. Shiloh, whose name was now officially confirmed, gestured with a hand to add the explanation of his absence as the stranger watched impatiently. They thought they recognized me as someone they knew, but it was a tiny misunderstanding. Liz theoretically as well as literally put her foot down at that, stomping in frustration and getting more childish the longer she was around her childhood companion.
Come on.
We do know you. Shiloh merely shrunk in on himself. The tone he spoke with was pained. Sorry. You honestly couldn't tell if he was apologizing for the upset feelings of your sister or the palpable dissatisfaction of his new acquaintance. That in itself was very Shiloh-like. Oh, you know him, is that it? The stranger spoke in a dismissively scoffing tone, as if the words sounded so absurd to him it was almost amusing. Almost. But the sternness of his demeanor quickly reinstated itself. Well, do you know me? I'll tell you. I'm someone who's been forced against his will to be aware of what's going on in Shiloh's ridiculous personal life for a year. If the two of you had any importance in his general day-to-day existence, it would have come up by now. Don't bother trying to exaggerate any trivial connection you might have. It's not good enough. He's with us, and you'll survive without him. Now stop loitering in the road. It's rude.
Excuse me?
We're the rude ones? The high-strung ranting got on an audible gasp from Shiloh, who finally started to speak up again in defense. Nate, that's really mean. It's also true. We're leaving. With that declaration, the unofficially introduced Nate indignantly spun on his heels and walked speedily towards where the group went, completely confident that Shiloh would follow behind. Oh, people can sure have bad attitudes, huh? Why can't they just try to get along? It's not hard. Don't worry though, I bet you won't have to deal with him again. And I'm sorry, I can't stay to talk to you, but I hope you have a really nice life.
Bye.
Bye! And that was it. His final parting words given, Shiloh left the two of you behind to catch up with his own life that he had to go live. Liz watched his exit, stunned, only to frown when it hit her that he was really gone as quickly as he appeared. It happened so fast you hadn't even been able to get a word in. She sighed, all the energy she built up releasing with the breath. I could have told him his last name was Fields. His birthday is October 30th. That would have proved it, but no. Whoever Nate is, he sucks. He was so unnecessarily unpleasant when all you wanted is to talk to someone for a moment. Why aren't you running after him? Liz merely shook her head, pushing off childish thoughts. I think we can leave it there, thanks. He's in the middle of a high school field trip, and it was already enough being able to see him. There's something reassuring about witnessing firsthand that he's still out there, enjoying his own part of the world. Though, if given the chance, I could definitely have a few words with him about the company he's got. She laughed, but you could tell there wasn't much humor to it. She was mad at that guy, even if she was happy to let Shiloh go. Maybe they're only with each other because of the trip, and it's not usually how things are.
Right?
True. We can only hope the same for him as he did for us. Have a nice life, Shiloh. Have a good life. Liz smiled at you. It had the self-confidence you knew so well from her. Come, kid, let's finish our own trip. Yeah. No matter how either of you really felt about the occurrence, it was something you simply had to accept. People you know just disappear and reappear in the most unexpected ways. The two of you enjoyed what remained of your outing until it was time to return home. By the time you arrived back, the sun was already beginning to set. You arched your back as you stretched your arms towards the ceiling. While it had been a good day, it had enough activity to cover an entire week. Liz tried to hide a yawn behind her hands. You weren't the only one feeling worn out. I'll be heading up to your room. I mean, the guest room, since mine stopped being available as soon as I was out the door. Her tone was light. She'd had quite a lot to say on the subject when you'd first taken over her bigger room after she left for college, but there have been many trips back home for her since then. The room hasn't been hers for years. It was more of a running joke now that she continued to bring the topic up to this day. Thanks for being so gracious about giving it up. I had no choice. A small laugh was shared between you and your older sister. You better believe you'll be back in the guest room when you've got your own place and we're both in town for a visit. We can take turns. You'll have Thanksgiving, I'll get Christmas. What a reasonable and mature suggestion. I'll think about accepting it. She flashed her familiar grin, and you couldn't help but feel glad she was back around, even if it was temporary. With that, she plodded off to the spare room. You were ready to do the same. Moving into a new space was your first opportunity to decorate from scratch. Alright, so this is where I ended it, so this is where we're going to end it now. I've been going for about an hour, so I definitely blew through that a lot faster than the first time, which is, it's fine. Next episode should be better. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you with the next episode of this in 2 weeks, but I have something else coming out in 2 days, which I may or may not have already announced, so get hyped, I guess. Anyway, thank you guys so much, and I hope to see you in the next one.